Hello, my name is Nigel Thorne and I'm concerned about the direction the Welsh Government is taking to tackle homophobic and transphobic discrimination. In a speech for Pride Month in 2023, Mark Drakeford restated the Welsh Government's commitment to make Wales the most LGBTQ+ friendly nation in Europe.
Mae'n fraint I fi cael bod yma yn Pride Cymru today. When we said in 2021 that we wanted to make Wales the most LGBTQ+ friendly place in Europe, that is what we meant. And the action plan that our Welsh Labour government published earlier this year is a powerful statement of our determination to secure the open and equal Wales that we all want to see. Our ambition is to use every lever we have available to guarantee that stigma and discrimination have no place in Wales.
One of the levers that the Welsh Government is using in attempting to ensure that stigma and discrimination have no place in Wales is queer theory, and specifically gender theory, a praxis-driven philosophy that aims to undermine heteronormativity. Queer theory is one element of gender identity ideology, a belief that we all have a gender identity that is independent of our biological sex. Leo Sapir, a fellow of the Manhattan Institute, recognises two mutually incompatible propositions underpinning gender identity ideology: queer theory and gender identity essentialism. Gender identity essentialism is the belief that gender identity exists pre-socialisation. It is innate. Among many organisations who promote this belief is Stonewall. Stonewall tell teachers that children can recognise their gender identity from as young as 2 years old. There is no scientific evidence to support this belief. Education Minister Jeremy Miles, however, seems to believe it is true, and all that is required in society is greater social acceptance. In an article titled "Do the Little Things, Do the Big Things Too," published on the 9th of March 2023, Miles wrote, "I was also a gay teenager, in a time when not a single thing in the life of the school, in any part of my life in fact, affirmed my identity, or told me it was okay to feel the way I did. No positive messages, no role models, nothing. So my commitment to making sure every young person gets the very best start in life, whatever their background, and that schools should be inclusive places, reflecting the diversity of modern Wales, and where no one feels on the outside, like I did. That commitment is personal. It's absolute, and I will not compromise on it." So, in LGBT+ History Month, I'm really proud to have introduced our LGBT inclusive Relationships and Sexuality Education Code. As a young gay man, the Tories' attempts to demonise people like me with Section 28 was one of the reasons I got into politics. We have brought in these changes despite an organised misinformation campaign involving hard right elements, and I promise you, I will stand up to them. I will never be deflected from our efforts to protect young people and help them to be safe and healthy. The problem is, there is no evidence that there is such a thing as an innate gender identity. Without gender identity essentialism, the ideology is just left with queer theory. And queer theory is a political philosophy whose proponents believe that power lies within language, and by forcing a change in the language that people use, they can change people's perceptions. Cardiff University is a hotbed of gender identity radicalism, and they have a Sexualities and Gender Research Unit. Their webpage states, "This research cluster brings together people interested and involved in research on sexuality and/or gender, primarily in the School of Social Sciences, but including interested people from other schools and departments. We come from a diverse range of disciplinary backgrounds and theoretical approaches and are working towards developing our cross-disciplinary understanding of gender, sexuality, and the relationship between them. It goes on. At one level, gender may seem much more susceptible to definition. It has traditionally been said that while sex is biological, one is male or female, gender is social and cultural. But recent theorists, following Judith Butler, and including some of our members, see biological sex and gender as inextricably mixed, and both, in some senses at least, culturally constructed and performative. Some, indeed, question the usefulness of gender as a category. Nevertheless, we do talk about gender and are interested in the difference that gender makes in a variety of sites, from the workplace and school to popular culture and literary texts. Those who question the usefulness of gender as a category are those who hold gender-critical views. Gender-critical people believe that biological sex is immutable, gender is a social construct, and that people should not feel constrained by social expectations of roles and behaviours based on their sex. In contrast, those who follow Judith Butler, an academic heavily influenced by postmodern ideas derived from French philosophy, are queer theorists and believe they have a mission to change society. As it states on the Sexualities and Gender Research Unit webpage, we are committed to delivering research that matters. The research section of the webpage states, staff and graduate students in the school are involved in research and scholarship in the following areas: Welsh Assembly, the old name of the Senedd, mainstreaming gender and sexuality policies, gender and education. The underlying premise of queer theory is that power lies within language, and by forcing a change in the language that people use, they can change people's perceptions. If perceptions are changed, people's behaviour will be liberated from social expectations. Queer theory aims to undermine heteronormativity, the perception that to be normal, boys must be masculine and sexually attracted to girls, and girls must be feminine and sexually attracted to boys. Butler refers to this as the heterosexual matrix. In her seminal work, Gender Trouble, she writes, "There is no reason to divide up human bodies into male and female sexes, except that such a division suits the economic needs of heterosexuality and lends a naturalistic gloss to the institution of heterosexuality. Hence, for Wittig, there is no distinction between sex and gender. The category of sex is itself a gendered category, fully politically invested, naturalized but not natural. The second, rather counterintuitive claim that Wittig makes is the following: a lesbian is not a woman. A woman, she argues, only exists as a term that stabilizes and consolidates a binary and oppositional relation to a man. That relation, she argues, is heterosexuality. A lesbian, she claims, in refusing heterosexuality is no longer defined in terms of that oppositional relation. Indeed, a lesbian, she maintains, transcends the binary opposition between woman and man. A lesbian is neither a woman nor a man. But further, a lesbian has no sex. She is beyond the categories of sex. Through the lesbian refusal of those categories, the lesbian exposes, pronouns are a problem here, the contingent cultural constitution of those categories and the tacit, yet abiding presumption of the heterosexual matrix. Hence, for Wittig, we might say, one is not born a woman, one becomes one. But further, one is not born female, one becomes female. But even more radically, one can, if one chooses, become neither female nor male, woman nor man. To undermine the heterosexual matrix, Butler proposes the dissemination of teaching that downplays the significance of biological sex and elevates the significance of a personal gender. One member of the university very much involved in mainstreaming gender and sexuality policies and gender and education is Professor J Renold, who is a great enthusiast for Judith Butler. In 2006, an article of Professor Reynolds was published in the British Journal of Sociology of Education, The article was titled, "They Ought to Let Us Play Unless You're Going Out to One of Them. Girls, Boys and Butler's Heterosexual Matrix in the Primary Years." In the article, Renold makes it quite plain that she believes that children's social interactions within primary school are coerced by this heterosexual matrix. She ends her article with something of a mission statement. The heteronormativity of gender relations in the early years is certainly ripe for some gender trouble, and some of this work is well underway and radically disrupting a range of gender and sexual truths in what might be more fittingly described as the heteroformative years. Professor Renold has a long association with the Welsh Government, and before that the Welsh Assembly, and has been highly influential in the change to the definitions of the word gender. In 2017, the then Cabinet Secretary for Education, Kirsty Williams, asked Professor Renold to chair an expert panel on sex and relationships education. In December 2017, 2 documents were published: The Future of Sex and Relationships Education Curriculum in Wales and Informing the Future of Sex and Relationships Education Curriculum in Wales. Both contained a highly verbose definition of the word gender in the glossary that was derived from the work of Judith Butler. The definition of the word gender includes the following: while the concept gender can include the different ways societies assign chromosomes or body parts to sex categories, it is not synonymous with sex. This is in contrast to the definition of gender within the Oxford English Dictionary. Kirsty Williams accepted the proposals and thanked Professor Emma Renold for her work. In 2018, Professor Renold took these new ideas to the United Nations. They discussed the making of the innovative national resource agenda, which was developed by Professor Renold in association with the Children's Commissioner for Wales, the NSPCC, Cymru, Welsh Women's Aid and the Welsh Government. The definition of the word gender in the Future of the Sex and Relationships Education Curriculum in Wales document is repeated here. The agenda resource encourages children to question their gender and to get beyond the binary. The resource states, "We wanted to let people know that in the animal and human world, sex is not just male and female. There are also many different genders." It also encourages young people to watch online video blogs and use the social media site Tumblr, where Butler's ideas were spreading rapidly amongst teenage girls.
The most important theme on Tumblr during this era was disembodiment. You have to remember this as we start to go through all of these crazy gender and sexuality labels that came out of Tumblr during this era. Teenage girls are prone to disembodiment as they start to go through puberty and they experience things like sexualization and catcalling for the first time, and the body becomes a site of a lot of anxiety for teenage girls. The political ideology that they developed on Tumblr was therefore defined by a separation from the sex body and an intense amount of anxiety around sex and sexuality.
And now many people might be thinking that these ideas aren't new. They're from academia, particularly gender studies departments, and you'd be right. But these ideas were made real in concrete on Tumblr. Teenage girls are not particularly good at nuance or philosophy or anything else because they're kids. So the complex theories laid out in Butler became really crude and simplified. Performing a gender meant literally being that gender in every sense, regardless of biological sex, sexuality, perception, appearance, anything else.
Butler's theories may have remained popular in postmodernist departments of universities, but the reason why gender identity ideology is so popular today and embedded in the third sector is because teenagers took their ideas and ran with them.
Young Welsh people have certainly run with these ideas.
do your guys' flags mean, in case someone doesn't know what it means?
My one that I'm wearing is the trans flag. I'm trans, female to male, and I came out 2 years ago, and this one is the pansexual flag. Trans means that you go from basically one to the other, it's a transition, and pan means that you love everybody. You love everyone despite what they look like, despite gender or anything like that. It's a pure love for the soul for me.
So my flag is lesbian. Depending on which definition you look, it's either women who only love women or it's non-men who only love non-men.
It's simple. Transgender women are women, transgender men are men, and non-binary people are non-binary. Gender fluid people are gender fluid. Gender identities are valid, and if you're unable to take a concept on board because you're stuck into the binary that you were taught as a child and you can't learn from that, that's fine. Just keep your mouth shut, because it's nothing to do with you. For everyone who's accepting of our community, thank you very much. But I'm just grateful that I live in Wales, where my government accepts the validation of people.
Although it is much less popular now, gender identities are still being created on Tumblr. And young people use the social media platform to share stories of their surgeries and the doctors to avoid. By 2022, the new RSE Code and Guidance to be used by every publicly funded school in Wales was approved. It does radically disrupt a range of gender and sexual truths. Following Butler's guidance within the code, there is no mention at all of the words male, female, man, boy or girl. There are, however, 17 references to the word gender. The new code and guidance did make the news, even in Canada, commonly regarded as the wokest country in the world. Children will be taught that gender is an innate identity, but also refers to social expectations of roles and behaviours. Meanwhile, a gender was getting lots of recognition around the UK. In February 2023, the LGBTQ+ Action Plan was published. In the glossary of the plan, there is yet another definition of the word gender. The sociological definition has been dropped entirely, and gender is simply defined as a term that is used to refer to whether someone's internal sense of themselves is female, male, or non-binary. People's gender does not always align with the sex they were assigned at birth. This term is sometimes used in the context of gender expression or gender identity. In April 2023, the United Nations independent expert on sexual orientation and gender identity, Victor MADRIGAL-BORLOZ, visited Cardiff and met with Hannah Blythen and a number of trans activists. In June 2023, the Welsh Government issued a press release that stated, United Nations praises Welsh Government's LGBTQ+ Action Plan for Wales as example of good practice in human rights policy making. The press release quoted Deputy Minister for Social Partnership Hannah Blythen. The United Nations praise for our LGBTQ+ Action Plan and ambition to become the most LGBTQ+ friendly nation in Europe is humbling. But I very much recognise there remains work to be done, and that Pride events still have an important part to play across our nation. Sadly, LGBTQ+ people continue to face attacks globally, especially transgender women and girls, and our rights are at risk of being rolled back. That's why, here in Wales, we stand proudly together with and within our LGBTQ+ communities. In July 2023, Senate member Dawn Bowden tweeted, "Not just during Pride Month, but all year round, your Welsh Labour government wants Wales to be a place where you can live free from fear and discrimination. I'm really glad the United Nations has recognised the LGBTQ+ Action Plan as an example of good practice in human rights policymaking." In June 2021, MADRIGAL-BORLOZ acknowledged that gender is not innate.
Gender is not something that is inherent to persons. There is no evidence to that effect. Gender is, in fact, the relationship between the person's free will and the series of stereotypes that assign behaviors or patterns or roles to a particular given sex or to the understanding of sex in a given society.
Why then is MADRIGAL-BORLOZ praising an action plan that changes the definition of words? The answer comes in a virtual queer workshop he attended in October 2021.
The inquiry that I carried out in relation to gender also touches upon the significant concern that appears to exist over the challenging of the binary. And I conclude that there is a reason why language is important in relation to this, and it's that just like injustice has been crafted on a binary key over the last many decades, justice has been also expressed in binary terms. And so, of course, there is significant sensations of vertigo when the challenging of the binary appears to seek dismantling all binary structures, because yes, on the one hand, they would aim at destructing injustice, but on the other hand, there is significant concern that it would destroy social achievements that have been also crafted in that key.
MADRIGAL-BORLOZ, in line with the queer theory philosophy, believes social injustices arise not from material reality, but from language. And by changing language, people's perceptions can be changed. In an attempt to remove stigma and discrimination, the Welsh Government are engaged in a massive exercise in social engineering. On August the 31st, 2023, 4 gender-critical women spoke at an event arranged by Merched Cymru, the Swansea Bay Resistors, and Women's Right Network Wales, held at the Taliesin Theatre in Swansea. The 4 women who spoke were eminently sensible. There was a small protest of trans activists who graffitied the building. And this highlights the issue that a whole generation of marginalised young people have been encouraged by queer theory to look inward rather than outward for their sense of identity. And they respond with anger at anyone who refuses to accept that their subjective rationalisation of their own feelings is an objective truth. This is a massive social problem. Those parents who would prefer that their child wasn't encouraged to believe that they can choose to become neither female nor male, woman nor man, may wish to support Public Child Protection Wales. Links are included below.